coming again from what's going on in the courts right now, because it's still going on, the dissenting voices and the majority voices. Of course, people would ask, how does one finally say, I'm a dissenting voice, I don't agree, and then the other voices say, we are for this position? How is that process arrived at? I'm sure many viewers are asking, how does that get about? Because the last time there was a consensus, like there was, you know, the team said we're unanimous on this
All
one.
seven of them.
All seven of them said we are throwing out this this petition. But this time they're divided. How is that process?
Well, normally, how it happens, I'm not sure if this is what the Supreme Court did, but normally what happens is that once you have concluded the hearing, you go and sit and have a conference amongst the bench that listened to the case being presented. Now, at that point, when you're having this conference, you begin, because remember that the judges, even though there's a recording going on of everything that is being said, they take notes. And they note certain things. And in the process of taking those notes, they also note at the side something that stood out for them. And that is why sometimes you'd see that in the process of the proceedings, a judge would ask a certain question of the lawyer because there's something they want to clarify, something that is not clear to them, either from their reading of the documents before they came to court or from what has been stated by the lawyer. Then later on, when they go and they have this conference, they discuss the certain aspects of it, and including how their interpretation of the law is in as far as that issue is concerned. So at that point when they're discussing, then you would also still need to go back and look at the proceedings, because there's a difference. There's a difference in the pleadings that are filed in court and a difference in what the lawyers say. Because you find that many other times that lawyers will come and say certain things which should be highlights and emphasis of the documents that they've already filed, but you find that someone will come and say something completely outside anything that they filed there. So that is what you find lawyers referring to as giving evidence from the bar, where he'll be stating things, he's not authorized, he's not sworn any affidavit to state that that is a fact, because when you swear an affidavit, then that has a certain strength, a certain weight in law. But you find that they will not have sworn, so it's their own statement made in the process of making a presentation. So you will go back to look at the documentation, the evidence that they presented, and see whether that is actually an aspect that they brought out. And that is why, for example, today, the CJ said that the aspect of asking a certain section of the Constitution to be declared unconstitutional, that though it is an important issue, you cannot ambush people. You should have already stated it so that even the respondents had enough time to prepare and present on it, but it is a presentation that was made just when they were making the highlights before the court. So then when they're discussing this, then the opinion generally you'll find that people are agreeing on certain issues and perhaps they're not agreeing on certain issues. In the current case, it is apparent that where the dissent emerged was when they were saying, at what point does the burden shift? If I come, because if I come and I say to the police that my laptop has been stolen, as at that time, it is still not the duty of the police to go and start investigating it. I cannot go and start saying the police have failed. But if I show them, this is my receipt for the laptop, I was seated in this hotel, and this is the receipt for the bill I paid there, and my laptop got stolen when I was there, then definitely now there's some work for the police to do. They can begin to investigate. So at what point does the burden of proof shift in a case? It seems that that is where the dissent came from, because I remember that the dissenting opinion read by Justice Ojwang was very clear that in his opinion, the burden remains solely with the players. And the players here being the political actors, the political parties. He excluded the other player, which is the IEBC, from his opinion. Whereas the majority opinion seemed to feel that at one stage, when you have been able to show certain things, then the burden of proof moves or shifts to the person who has got the mandate, the legal mandate, to be able to determine that. So it is at that point, sometimes in the process of having that discussion, you can actually get to convince your colleagues that my way is right, that my analysis is right, because you will be showing them, my reading was this. And you find in most cases, because one thing that judges learn to do very well is to listen. They will want to listen to why your opinion is taking that direction. And if they are able to see sense in what you're saying, they may change their opinion or adopt yours, or they may not. So that is when then it becomes, if more are going in one direction, it becomes dissenting.
Okay, the big point here is that it's usually a conversation,
it's legal conversation.
And there is a possible shifting of position.
There's a possible
in the course of the conversation.
And it has to shift because as you continue to analyze the evidence, sometimes the evidence supports a thing that you thought was an issue, or it doesn't.
Okay, just again, going in that on the line of that imagination.
Yes.
How passionate are their disagreements sometimes? Are they collegial disagreements in terms of I dissent, or are they, because the question we're asking ourselves is that now there are two judges who have a different opinion. Going forward, how does the bench relate in future cases?
One of the things about the legal profession is that courtesy and decorum is actually something that is very key. So that even when you appear before a court and you lose, you must stand, bow, and say, I am most obliged. You know, when at that time you want to scream at the judge, you know, but you have to say that. Now, even in dissenting, it is important that you state why you are dissenting and focus on what your dissent is based on. Going forward, I think that the majority voice within the Supreme Court will have to, particularly with the guidance and a firm leadership of the CJ, will have to embrace the dissenting opinions. And I say this why? I say this because the dissenting opinions that were given, particularly the one of Justice Ojwang, was not a dissent on the law as he interpreted it, other than the fact of where he said the burden. That was his interpretation of where the burden shifts. But then he went on to extensively criticize the decision that was made by the other judges, which I thought was in extremely bad taste. To critique it and say, well, yes, perhaps he wanted to show why he felt he could not move with this team or this decision, but he had an opportunity to show that by stating how he interpreted the law, and that's it. But to go and say this is ridiculous, it is not a good analysis, it is not, use that kind of terminology is most unfortunate, I think. But I think that Justice Maraga is grown enough, will be able to lead the others into working with this team to be able to continue to.
Yeah, and we've had in other courts,
yes,
that as the court makes decisions over different cases in other places, certain judges gain a certain, people gain a certain definition of who they are.
Yes.
They say we have a liberal judge,
yes,
we have a conservative judge.
Yes.
And should there be other cases coming to the Supreme Court in Kenya, do we see a time when the judges are going to be characterized as conservative, as traditional, as, in terms of those kinds of descriptions?
I think definitely that happens every time. And one of the things that is required in law is that you must be able to be predictable. If you're a person that we don't know what you're going to be looking for today, today you say this, tomorrow you say that, then it is not good practice in law. So that is one of the things that people expect of the court, that they will analyze you, they will look at the trend of the decisions that you make, and they will decide that this is the way to characterize you. Now, one of the things that has happened now is, remember that some of the decisions of 2013 were upheld by this court. For example, they already upheld the fact that rejected votes will not count. That was a decision that was made in 2013, and when Justice Lenaola spoke, he said that that is what they also find. So they did, I think there was another one that is now skipping my mind, but they did uphold some of the things that were upheld in 2013. So that is already a tradition that the court has been setting. But again, when it comes to whether what the threshold is, they did state, and Justice Baraga said it 3 times. 3 times, I counted. He said, even if you go back again and you go and do the same thing and you come back to me, I will still make the same decision. This is still the same way we are going to think,
okay,
because the law is not going to change.
Okay, just stay with that, because we would want to look quickly just at the relationship between the judiciary and the other arms of government.
Yes.
And with the kind of stance that Justice Maraga is taking, the question becomes, is the judiciary attaining more independence, more acute independence, or is it carving an isolation?
I think that what is happening is that finally the taxpayer is getting their money's worth. We have had a system, a very expensive system in this country, where we have had people die over the 20 years, right from the times we had the Moi rule, and people fighting for more democratic space. We had people suffering. We had people who, our great leaders, we also, Matiba as a vibrant person, and then suddenly being shown when he could not talk properly and would not sit still. We know the journey that this country has had to try and ensure that we have a democratic space that works. Democracy says, and the system of governance that we have worked so hard for, says that we want checks and balances. We don't believe in one aristocratic system where you are the king and queen and you are baba and mama, as we used to say in Kanu days, and what you say stands. We don't want that. We want a place where when we feel your decision is not good, we can run to someone else. And we normally say that in the house also, that if you feel mommy is too harsh, you know daddy is kinder in this aspect. If you feel daddy is too harsh, you know mommy is kind. Mom is kind in this aspect. So we want that system of governance where there's checks and balances. And the unfortunate thing is that we have only had these things in paper without having them in practice. And what Justice Maraga has done with his actions and with his decision and his detailed decision today is that he has shown people that, listen, when you put an institution into place and you give it a mandate and you say, let it do this, it will do that.
Okay.
Yes.
The IEBC is
Yes.
now in great focus.
Yes.
And a lot is expected of it going into the redoing of the elections.
Yes.
Now, do you feel that the IEBC will be able to put itself together within the 60-day period that is required by the Constitution?
Unfortunately, I have been saying this for a while now. I may sound a little biased, but I don't think that they can. And I can support my statement. I can support my statement by saying that I don't think that IEBC can do this because, for example, when the Supreme Court decision came, yes, it was a shocker for everybody. Anybody who is truthful will say it was a shocker for them. I think other than Justice Maraga and his team, nobody else expected that that was going to be the decision that would come from that court. Now, the minute that decision was made, any sensible leadership would have gone and had a retreat, like the Naivasha retreat that they had later, to sit and analyze what were the processes, what were the systems, where could we have gone wrong, how could this have happened. But instead, immediately, the top leadership, being the leadership from the policy side, Chebukati, went into a finger-pointing situation where he started saying this and that, and he's making, it was like he's in a panic mood. The other head of the institution, which is Chiloba, being in charge of the day-to-day running of the institution, went into denial mode. The court has spoken. It is an independent body, and he's everywhere saying that history will show that this was the best election ever. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Now, if they did that, and even their analysis, now speaking as a lawyer, the analysis of the decision, the 2013 decision was totally different. The circumstances of the case were different. The outcome of that decision was different. This was a different case. But deciding that they're going to have only 2 people in the ballot, without even explaining to people, without bringing the players on the table, giving them an opportunity. There are those who had already considered and may not have wanted to rerun anyway, but giving them an opportunity to step down, for me, is an indicator that, again, they were rushing to do things. So if they will be able to wake up now with this reasoned decision, I would be pleasantly surprised, but I don't think.
The timelines are tight.
They're very tight.
Okay. Of course, we'll have more conversations on what the possibilities will be if they are not able to put themselves together within the constitutional timelines. But a very important question for you, Millie, and for the Kenyans, because the more this air continues, this suspense of the president is not yet elected, the longer it goes, the more divided the Kenyans seem to get. And I'd want you to speak to the Kenyans right now and tell them, how can we remain united even as we await what we can call a more agreeable presidential outcome when the election is done? Just speak to the Kenyans on that camera there.
I think that one of the things that I have said, I am one of those skeptics. I did not believe that the situation in Kenya would be where it is today. But I think that the fact that Kenyans pray a lot, and I'm not talking about the leaders, but I'm talking about the ordinary Kenyans who pray en masse, their prayers were answered. We had a court that was able to do what is expected of it. That is one. 2, we had a police force that somehow was able to try and work to ensure that people stayed united. We had systems that were grappling with this strange situation, but tried to ensure that we remained an organized, respected nation. A nation that can stand beside America, beside Britain, beside Uganda, beside Rwanda, and say we are a country as well. And we must not lose that. We must not forget that. Why am I saying that? We have institutions. They may not work perfectly, but they work. We have a parliament, we have a legislature, and we have a part executive. At the county level, we have all the counties in place that are working. At the national level, we will have a determination. If we cannot get the president elected within 60 days as required, we will have a determination from the court. We can go there and they can tell us what are the powers that an acting president can have during that period. And we'll be able to go on. So let's just continue to believe that the systems will work. We continue to live our day-to-day life. Keep an eye on the politics of the day, because politics impacts our lives. We can't ignore it. But remember that it doesn't need me to go and hit somebody or to hate somebody for it to work. There are institutions and there are systems that will make sure that it works.